Hello, Sarah of SEK Handmade here, and I am so excited to be live with you today. It has been a while since I've done any sort of live, and I'm so thrilled to be back at it. So, for those of you who don't know me, excuse me, I am Sarah Korth, owner and all things of SEK Handmade. My biggest passion is helping crafters grow confidently. And so that's why I chose for our first topic to be 5 reasons that learning new stitches is hard and how I can help. Okay. I learned to crochet when my oldest was an infant. And I went to one of our local yarn stores. They were wonderful. I took a class. I had been knitting previously, and I actually found learning to crochet to actually be pretty easy to pick up. So I learned the basic stitches, the single crochet, the double crochet, the half double crochet. And, I made the little rectangles and all of those things. And I quickly found that, got it. I can do the basic stitches. I'm ready to move on. And so because I was a knitter, I was already on Ravelry. And actually one of the things that tempted me into learning crochet was I would type in, baby hat into Ravelry, and it would come up with all these adorable crochet things. And I was like, wow, I need to know how to do that, right? So I got on Ravelry. I look for a project. I pick a project. I'm so excited. I feel like I've got the basics down. I'm ready to dive into something more complicated. It didn't go well, I guess, is the end of that story. I picked a project somewhat randomly, and I very quickly got frustrated because it's a little bit of a leap to go from learning basic stitches to applying them to a more complicated pattern and to growing your personal stitch library in your brain of things that you know how to make. Now, don't feel like you need to keep all stitches in your brain, because that's what that's what patterns are for. That's what YouTube is for. You don't need to keep all that locked in your brain. But now that I am an experienced crocheter and a designer, I think there are 5 reasons why people struggle to go from having a firm grasp on the basic stitches and mastering what they learned at that very first crochet class into more complicated patterns and more texturized stitches. So here we go. I told you before that I started as a knitter, and one of the things that blew my mind when I started learning crochet was crochet can go in any direction. When you're knitting, you've got your stitches on your needle, and you're pretty much going to the next stitch almost always. There are, of course, variations on that. But with crochet, you can go this way, and then you can turn and you can go that way, and then you can add stitches here and come back and then go flat for a little bit and then in the round, and it's complicated. And that's wonderful and amazing, and you can make so many unique and fantastic things in crochet because of its ability to be adaptable. But when you're newer to crochet, the fact that you could be going in one direction and turn and do something totally different, it's confusing. So, yeah. Reason number 1 that you may be struggling to move to more complicated projects and stitches is that crochet is really flexible, and that can be a little confusing. And that's okay. There are solutions to this, I promise. Reason number 2, and this was my biggest one for why I completely failed at the first more complicated project I chose, is you've jumped ahead. Imagine that learning crochet in that crochet class is like your ABCs. You've learned how to start, you've learned about hooks and yarn, and you've made your first little steps and stitches. You've learned your ABCs. Now imagine your first crochet project that you pick that's more complicated is like reading Moby Dick. There's a lot between learning your ABCs and reading Moby Dick. And so you are not incapable of reading Moby Dick. You just need the steps in between to get you there so that you can grow to confidently do more complicated patterns. So reason number 1, crochet is really flexible. Reason number 2, you've jumped ahead too many steps and you're getting ahead of yourself. Reason number 3 that you may be struggling to improve your crochet skills is that you either don't know what your learning style is, or the pattern that you're using doesn't support your learning style. Back to me, for example. I'm going to feel old saying this, but I'm going to say it anyways. When I learned crochet, YouTube wasn't a thing. It's fine. I am a very visual learner. And because YouTube wasn't a thing, there weren't videos. And so nothing supported my style of learning back then. And you'll find today that there are designers who do not do video tutorials in their patterns, no matter how complex the stitches. And that's okay. But if you know that video tutorials are how you learn best, you're going to be most successful if you choose a pattern that offers video tutorials. If you are a person, I don't understand these people, but I know you're out there. If you're a person who likes to read instructions and that's how you learn best, then you're going to want the instructions of the new stitch or technique to be really spelled out and clearly written out for you so that you can follow along. So you need to figure out your learning style. Whichever you do that really clicks for you, whether it's reading the instructions or watching a video or having photo tutorials, it's helpful to know that and then to choose patterns that have those things. Here's a little tip that no one ever told me. 1, read the pattern listings. I tell you in all of my pattern listings what is included in them. 2, if you're curious about something about a pattern, you're not out of your right to message a pattern designer and just say, hey, does this have video tutorials? What if they say no? Then you haven't spent your money on something that you're going to end up frustrated with, or they don't provide the video tutorials, and so you're going to have to go search them out. But then and you can make an educated choice. All right. Reason number 4 why you might be struggling, and this is, so many of these, not your own fault, just challenges. Number 4, the pattern isn't very clear. There can be several reasons for this, but I have found that in not even recent years, since the advent of Ravelry, which it's been around for a long time, but even more so with the advent of all sorts of small business and yarn pattern selling platforms, you can be an independent designer Anybody can be. Anybody can be an independent pattern designer. And that is a wonderful thing because it has allowed all sorts of people, a really diverse amount of people, all sorts of really creative people to self-publish patterns without having to go through the avenues of being published by a well-established company, a magazine or a yarn company. However, with that freedom of anyone being able to publish, there's also the potential for people who don't have the most firm understanding of best practices in pattern writing to write patterns. I downloaded this adorable, I have all boys, but I have a niece and she got this little doll and it was adorable. And I wanted to make her a little dress that this doll could wear. Downloaded this pattern. It was on Ravelry. It was for free. And in my mind, it was very clearly someone who just had come up with this pattern for fun and put it out there because other people might think it was fun. But because this person hadn't had other people look at it, it hadn't been tested, it hadn't been tech edited, she had just made it up from what she thought was clear. To me, as a designer, it was missing several things, which, as somebody who's more advanced in my crochet knowledge, that was fine. I made the dress. It was adorable. It fit the doll, thank goodness. But that can be a hurdle. If you come across someone who is inexperienced in pattern writing or doesn't have a firm understanding of standards, it can make their pattern unclear. The other thing is there are several ways to write crochet patterns that are technically correct, and you may prefer one style over the other. So if you're a person who likes things really concise, there's a style of pattern writing that is absolutely for you, and it's short and sweet, and that's wonderful. There's also a more in-depth type of pattern writing where you really spell out exactly in real sentence and wordy form where all of the stitches go. That is an equally valid style of pattern writing, but if it confuses you, that's not helpful to you. Also, going back to number 2, jumping ahead, there are many pattern designers out there who are not writing patterns specifically to teach people things. So they assume a level of knowledge by their consumers. And if you don't have that level of knowledge and try to dive into their more complicated patterns, you may find that they're too challenging and that you get frustrated and that there isn't enough in-depth instruction there to really follow along. Okay, reason number 5. If you are a video tutorial person like I am, I'm a visual person. If I can't picture it in my brain or see it with my eyeballs, I'm confused. If you are a video tutorial person and you don't have video tutorials from the pattern and the designer explaining to you how that pattern works, and you just go on to YouTube or some other site and search for a specific tutorial, you may come across the same problem that happens with independent pattern designing. And that is that anybody can post a video on YouTube. There's no standard of knowledge. And just the other day, I saw a video shared somewhere that said, learn the puff stitch, popcorn stitch, bobble stitch. Those 3 things are not one stitch. Those are 3 separate stitches. And when I went to the video, just to, like, out of curiosity, like, which one is she actually teaching? The answer, none of them. The stitch she was making was not a popcorn stitch, it was not a bobble stitch, and it was not a puff stitch. And nothing against her, she was trying to be helpful. She'd found a really beautifully textured stitch that she wanted to share. But if you don't know what a popcorn stitch is, and my pattern calls for a popcorn stitch, and you go to her tutorial to learn it and come back to my pattern, your final product is not going to look like my pattern. This happened to me in knitting one time. I was looking at a specific way to make one, like an additional stitch in my knitting. And it was a process that I was familiar with, but like needed a little refreshing. Guys, I watched 5 videos before I found somebody who did it correctly. Like, they were just a little off, which could be fine, but technically not correct. So that's another challenge that you could be coming across is incorrect tutorials. So I've given you lots of things that could be going wrong. Take a breath. We're not going to panic. There's a solution. Don't feel overwhelmed here. And I'm not saying, what I'm going to say to you next is how I can be your solution, but I'm not saying that I'm the only solution here. And I would love to go live again and just talk more generally about how to find really high quality patterns. So let's put that on the list of things to do. I am a formally trained teacher. I went to college for elementary school education. And I like to say that my superpower is explaining things to people. That's not a talent that everyone has, and that's okay. But as someone who all through life has never been the brightest and the best in the class, I have always had to work harder and look at things in multiple ways to learn. And so I gained the skills of being able to look at things multiple ways and being able to break things down into smaller steps and really clear instructions so that people could learn in a variety of ways. Because when I had little people in my class, they didn't all learn the same way. And it was my job to be able to teach to all of them. So I have come up with a pattern system specifically designed to help new crocheters move from knowing the basics to confidently growing in their skills. And here's what I have to offer you. I am working on and have created a tiered pattern system. And the way that this works is I start with tier 1 patterns. Tier 1 patterns are designed specifically to teach a skill. A skill. Not 7 or 8. 1. If you want to grow and really have firm knowledge in skills, learning them one at a time and building is what works best. So I have tier 1 patterns that focus on one specific skill. The other great thing about my tier 1 patterns is that they are all small and quick patterns. And here's why. Because what's the most frustrating thing about learning something new? Making a big project, realizing you've done it wrong, and crying as you frog the whole stinking thing. These projects are so small that if you, and who hasn't done this, if you are like going along and you're feeling really good and you get to the end of your project and you look at it and you say, my end where I just finished looks amazing, but my beginning looks awful. That's totally normal. And maybe you're okay with just being like, meh, it was my first one. That's good for that. But if you are someone who would like to see a whole project that looks really nice, you can frog the whole stinking thing and be like, meh, it didn't take me that long. And now I can start again at the point of being really good at that new stitch and make the whole project quickly again. So tier 1 projects focus on one stitch or technique. They are small projects that you can do multiple times to practice and that you won't cry if you have to frog them. Tier 2 patterns, kick it up a little notch, okay? These are going to be slightly larger patterns that include what was learned in the tier 1 pattern. The 2 tier patterns then combine the stitch with basic stitches, not with other more complicated stitches, but with basic stitches like double crochets and half double crochets and single crochets to make a larger project. It's just building. Now you've got tier 1, you've got your patterns, you've got the stitch down. You're ready to bump it up to a bigger project and really apply what you know to something larger and slightly more complicated. Then there are tier 3 patterns. The tier 3 patterns are larger, more complex patterns that also include the same stitches in tier 2 and tier 1, but then also combine with some more intermediate stitches. They also might include things like shaping. You can start at a tier 1 pattern, learn a new stitch, move to a tier 2 pattern, apply it to a larger project, move to a tier 3 pattern, and really let your new skills shine. My goal is for you to grow from that first new stitch into confidence in a larger, more complex, and really beautiful project. My patterns include photo tutorials, carefully written instructions describing the stitches, and video tutorials. Also, my patterns are tested, which means that I'm not the only one who can make them. They have been thoroughly tested by a variety of testers at a variety of levels of skill. And they have come back to me and given feedback and said, we understand this, we don't understand that. It would be clearer to me if you had this. I just published a pattern today and 3 testers came back to me and said, I understood what you were talking about, but I really would have liked a photo tutorial for that. Photo tutorial it is. So all of my patterns have been tested so that you can be confident that other crafters have created that pattern as well. Also, the majority of my patterns have been tech edited, and that means that someone whose specific job is to know and understand crochet pattern standards has looked at my pattern and said, these things are not standard. Here is how you can fix them. And I have said, I want my patterns to be as clear as possible. And so I will keep them standard because that's important to me. I value that. She also helps to keep my patterns consistent. And she helps me to understand what is most appropriate for beginners. So my patterns are specifically written with learning in mind by a trained teacher. They include photo and video tutorials. They have been tested by other crafters who have given feedback to help me make my patterns as clear as possible, and tech edited by a professional to make sure that they meet crochet standards. So I hope that you will subscribe to my YouTube channel. This is a place full of freeness for you to grow and gain knowledge. If you would like to grow in your crochet knowledge, subscribe. There's a little bell you can click that will give you notifications. And then you'll get notified when I post a new video, and you can come see what I'm up to and grow your crochet skills. And if you ever have any questions, I'm here. So join my email list, shoot me an email. I would love to chat with you. I love nothing more than helping crafters grow confidently in their craft. It was so good to chat with you guys today. Thank you so much for joining me. Comment in the comments below if you have a question. If you like this video, I would love if you would hit the like button. That helps other people see this video and will help other people then grow confidently in their craft. I'm gonna say it here, hold myself to it. I'm gonna try to go live every week. So join me back here next week at 11 o'clock CST. That's my time zone. And we'll chat more about crafting. Bye, guys. Happy crafting.